My name is Michelle Rappaport. I'm a school social worker, and I've been a school social worker for 26 years. I work with both regular education and students in special education. I've worked with students from early childhood through the high school years. I've noticed over the years that a lot of students have been suspended. Unfortunately, when they come back from the suspension, nothing changes. It's the same thing as when they left, and in some cases, it's worse because nothing was resolved. They're anxious about coming back to school. They don't know what the other person is feeling if somebody else is involved. If it was a teacher or an adult involved, they don't know how the teacher or adult is feeling towards them. And so they come back and nothing's resolved. In looking at that pattern and how things have worked out, I've decided that the best thing was to develop a curriculum. And the curriculum is called Building Bridges, an Alternative to School Suspension. The curriculum is based on restorative justice and cognitive behavioral principles. The restorative justice piece is where the students learn to make things right, and I'll explain that in a minute. The cognitive behavioral principles are where the students are learning to take responsibility for their behavior, as well as they are learning to process. They're learning to look at their behavior, they're looking to look at the results of their behavior, they look at how their behavior affects other people, how other people who are involved feel about it, and how they feel about their behavior as well. The restorative justice piece is learning to make things right. And there's two parts to that. The first thing is when somebody else is involved is, many times when something occurs, they've caused harm to that person. It could be physical harm and it could be emotional harm. So what the students are taught to do is to make things right. The other piece of that is when there's damage to property is restitution. So those students who have maybe caused damage, put a hole in the wall, broken something, will be given the opportunity outside of school hours, usually after school or during lunchtime, which is their time, to either fix what has been broken, if it's possible to fix it, put drywall up, fix something like a chair or something that may have been broken, or to do something for the school to make up for what has been done. The curriculum is based on 3 different parts. The first part is the thinking sheets. And the thinking sheets, there's 2 different types of thinking sheets. The first one is where nobody is involved. And that thinking sheet is basically where the student will take responsibility. They'll look at what they did, and they'll talk about how they felt about what happened, and then how they're going to change it or make it better for the next time. Now, the other thinking sheet has an empathy piece involved. And not only are they taking responsibility for what they did and how they felt about it, now they're looking at how did the other person feel about what occurred. They're also looking at how did it affect other people. So when you get into a fight or something like that happens within a school, it's not just between 2 people. Maybe adults get involved and they have to break it up. Maybe parents are called when something happens. If the police are involved, the students who witness the fight are affected by this as well. So it gives the students an opportunity to see that their behavior is not occurring in isolation. It's actually occurring with lots of other pieces involved. The last part of the thinking sheet is where they take a look at what they can do to make things better, and then what the other person can do. So that kind of leads into the second piece, which is the mediation and the processing with the other person involved. The processing, which I've just explained, is the first part of the Bridges curriculum. Now the next step can be one of a couple of things, and it's really up to the student of what they want to do next. The choice can be mediation if another person is involved. It can be the worksheets, or it can be the scenarios. The scenarios are when the students will have an incident that is very similar to their incident, and they would answer questions based on the scenario. And what this does is it gives the student an opportunity as a third person to kind of look outside of the situation in which they were involved in and be able to give advice, which is advice that they can use in the future. The worksheets, which is another part of the curriculum, is divided into different types of worksheets based on what the students' needs are. A lot of it is based on self-awareness, giving the students the opportunity to look at why they're doing what they're doing. It may look at relationships that they're in, the types of relationships they have. It may look at how they treat other people. It may be looking at how they view themselves. Other worksheets just look at maybe whether or not they're bullies, or if they're aware that they're bullying somebody. The third part of the Bridges program is the mediation piece. And this can occur at any time throughout the Bridges Day. And the mediation is really an important part. That's a really big piece of the restorative justice. And that's where the student is learning to make things right. And these behaviors, the incidents, they occur all over the country. Students are having problems with other people. Students are getting into fights, they're threatening, they're getting into arguments. And part of the problem is that they don't have the skills. They don't know how. People make mistakes all the time, but they don't have the skills to make things right, to go back and to say, hey, look, I did this and this is why. And why did you say that to me, or why did you do that to me? And that's a really, really important piece. So what we do is we have a mediation in which the two students are in the room together, or an adult and a student. There's at least 2 adults in the room when this occurs, and the students then have the opportunity to talk to the other person. At this point, the students may start with, well, why did you say that? Or why did you do that? Many times they find out that it was a misunderstanding or misperception. Other times they might find out that they were kind of set up by a third or fourth party where they were both told things by other people that weren't even true. And sometimes it's just they decide that they don't like each other, and that's okay. Because one of the big things that we tell the students when they come into the mediation is, we're not looking for you to be friends. You don't have to hang out on Friday night. You don't have to be Facebook friends. But you have to get along, and you have to be respectful in the school setting. The last piece is, once the students have finished the Bridges program, and the Bridges program can last anywhere from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, depending on the needs of the student and depending on the behavior and what occurred. Once they finish with the Bridges program, then they have the opportunity to do work. The big thing with suspension, the real problem with suspension, is kids are out of school. And when they're out of school, there's a loss of academic time. They usually don't bring work home, so they're not doing work at home. And then they come back to school and they're farther behind. And a lot of times some of the kids that are getting suspended are kids who really need to be in school. In the Bridges program, not only do they have the opportunity to do the work that they're missing in school, they have an adult there that can work with them. So if they need a little extra help in math, or if they need a little extra help in English, there's somebody there who can help them. And the really nice thing about it is, in most of your public high schools, there's teachers that have free periods throughout the day, math teachers, English teachers, science teachers, that can actually be called in to help those students with their needs. So not only are they in school and doing work, they're getting additional help that they need with the academics. I'm a school social worker in Illinois, and I don't know if you know this, but recently Illinois has passed some new legislation. And you know what it states? It says that all schools in the state of Illinois are going to be required to submit all of their exclusionary discipline. And this includes both suspensions and expulsions. In addition, they're also looking at any disproportionality in the suspensions, because they found that minorities and students with disabilities really have a higher rate of suspensions than the regular population. The top 20% of schools that fall into that category are going to be required to come up with a plan. And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but when I came up with the curriculum, there's really not a lot out there. There's some things on prevention, and there are other things that are available for the school to get involved in, for families and communities to get involved in. But there really isn't anything for if the student does something, if they get into trouble and they need to be suspended, what can happen instead. This curriculum takes care of that. This curriculum will meet that need. Suspension is probably one of the biggest things, one of the biggest problems facing education today. And one of those reasons, besides the loss of academic time, is the loss of money. School districts across the country are losing millions and millions of dollars every year. They're losing money in revenue, and they're losing money in administrative time. The amount of hours that it takes for an administrator to deal with the situation, and then once the student is suspended, the parent has to be called. The student has to be put someplace, so they're just being watched, but the student isn't doing anything, and then they're sent home. So not only is it a loss of revenue for the schools, but the schools are paying for students to be in school, and they're not being reimbursed. So when a student is sick, or in this case suspended, the school's not reimbursed by the state. So this is lost money. So in addition to the administrative time, now you've got a loss of revenue, and this is millions and millions of dollars per year. In education, a really important piece for a program to be successful is that it's evidence-based. Now, I've been piloting this program for 2 years in my school, and it seems to have been a really positive outcome. But that wasn't enough to make sure that it was working. So what I did is I approached Loyola University of Chicago, a professor who works there, and asked her would she be willing to research and evaluate my program. And we've been very pleased with preliminary results. Basically what they say is that any student who was in the Bridges program had a longer time before they reoffended than a student who was not in the Bridges program. So if a student was in Bridges, they had on average about 60 days before a second incident occurred. Students who were just suspended or refused the Bridges program had on average 20 days before they reoffended. So it was a much longer time in between offenses. And they also found in the preliminary results that students who were in Bridges were less likely after a second Bridges to have another offense, where students who refused this Bridges always had a third offense. And so preliminary results have been really positive, and Loyola is going to continue to research the program. I've taken all of this information and compiled it into a curriculum, and now the curriculum is a book. The book, Building Bridges, an Alternative to School Suspension, is available. You can purchase it on Amazon. In addition, in the curriculum, in the book, are the thinking sheets, and there's two different types of thinking sheets, and there's different levels of thinking sheets. There's the worksheets, and there's the scenarios. In the book, there's 51 scenarios. They're the most common scenarios that I found over the last 26 years. However, if you have a situation at your school that you've come across and it's not in my book, and if you submit that situation to me, I will take that situation and I will make it into a scenario and I'll send it back to you. I'm also available as a consultant to hire to come out to your school to set up a program. I'll travel any place within the United States to come to you, work with your staff so that you can have a program within your school as an alternative to suspension. If you want to reduce suspension, save your district money, and help students stay in school, contact me.